Welcome to Happy Hour, where we're flipping the script on the traditional happy hour. Instead of winding down at the drink, we're here to talk about what actually makes us happy and learn from society's healers, therapists, coaches, elders, spiritual leaders, and everyone in between. Join us as we dive into stories, insights, and tools that help us grow, heal, and support one another. Whether you're a seeker or a seer, this is for you. I'm Anurag, founder of Happy, and this series will be hosted by myself, along with my co-hosts, Mira and Tess, and we're excited to explore new ways to bring more joy and well-being into our lives. So take a deep breath, and let's dig in.
Welcome to Happy Hour, the part of the day where we get deep but want to keep it fun. I'm your co-host Mira, and I love talking to people, diving into the messy, beautiful, complicated human experience. From love and relationships to philosophy, parenting, family, and the wild ride of modern life, we're here to break it down with curiosity, humor, and maybe a drink in hand. So let's pull up a seat, swap stories, ask the big questions, and remind ourselves that we're all trying to figure this out together.
Today's episode of Happy Hour features a coach named Anna Laifer, who works with executives, leaders, entrepreneurs, and more, helping individuals understand why they want what they want, what success actually looks like for them versus society, and how they can be the most effective communicators and leaders for those who follow them. Today's episode was recorded several months ago, and unfortunately we had a little bit of audio issues. That being said, the content is so beautiful and so valuable, so please enjoy today's episode of Happy Hour featuring Mira Agarwala and Anna Laifer.
We are so excited. We are here today with Anna Laifer. She is a PCC certified coach. We're going to be delving into exciting topics about intuition and self-compassion and purpose. So tell me, so you're a PCC certified coach. You did a lot of work in the corporate world and consulting and leadership, and then you transitioned into having your own practice.
Yeah, so I worked in corporate consulting and executive search for many years, and I transitioned into leadership development and organizational consulting. And to be honest, part of what I loved about it was the capacity to work with leaders and to work in large organizations, working with very well-known brands and companies. But what it felt like was missing was what we're going to talk a lot about today, which is really the heart and the connection to intuition. And it felt like it was always more of an intellectual practice. And we were almost coming at it from like a very high level organizational lens versus
something
deeper,
more
personal, more related to purpose and meaning and that deeper connection. So I had gone on my own spiritual journey outside of work, which included meditation retreats. I went to a lucid dreaming workshop. I did somatic dance and movement.
Oh, wow.
And all these sort of different modalities. And so when I was getting my MBA, I wanted to start my practice that really weaved together a lot of these different things and bringing a lot of those practices into the corporate space.
Which I was just going to say is like such a necessity because especially I think after COVID, it's interesting how the personal and professional worlds blended together a lot more. Mm-hmm. And because of the remote work, people were more infused with everybody's day-to-day living. And I feel like, you know, this might sound dreamy and optimistic, but it sounds interesting that when you are working in a leadership capacity or a professional capacity, you would want people to really understand you from a personal level and understand you as a human to your core of what drives you, what motivates you, rather than just being an employee and having a set objective or goal in a performance capacity.
I think that it's so easy for us to move past, have these expectations and then just never be meeting them.
Well, and I think it's, to be honest, it's also a reflection of our Western cultural mindset here too. Yeah. It's the bar is never enough. Yeah. And that is a societal norm that is communicated to us even at a young age now. Like if you look generationally, right, when we were younger, I don't remember doing all these sports and activities. We had a little bit, but it was not to the level that kids are forced to act like many adults these days. And parents are exhausted because we are managing their schedules. And I read this amazing book that I loved called Hunt, Gather, Parent. It was all about parenting in different parts of the world that is not part of like a Western industrialized, rich and democratic country. And that research shows that over there, they are well-adjusted, happier kids with independence, with autonomy, with their own sense of intrinsic motivation, simply because they're not acting like these little CEOs that we have to be managed.
All these media, like basically they're sports or arts or extracurriculars. Yeah.
Right. And so
and the unhappiness of the parents having to play that role of just like chauffeuring and bringing, and it's just a lot, and it never being enough.
Exactly. And so then it's like, at what point do we stop and say, this is not like the right pace of life that we want to live, and we want to slow down to create those more mindful opportunities? Because I can see, at least for me, like it affects my children a lot, and they're not in a lot of activities, but when they are, they're tired and they're exhausted, and they don't have an opportunity to really just process what's happening around them. And then that in of itself creates issues in mental health. But how do we as a collective society work against a system that is pushing that?
Well, I do feel like there's so much that has to come back to just you making your own choices too.
Absolutely.
And being willing to be the advocate for that as much as you can.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just also, it's interesting because when I was working in corporate leadership development, it was more on like a larger scale, and now I'm much more on like individualized. But I feel like it's really about, it does take individuals within these sort of local, I think you've seen, I don't know, with like Wait Till 8 and like some of these larger, but that all stems from individual parents saying like, hey, we want to do things differently, or taking individual action.
Yeah.
But that's part of why I love working with leaders too, is because if I can help them within their organization or as they're setting a tone for a culture, it does have a big impact.
And you're dispensing that from the top down and distributing it on a much larger scale that hopefully people have a respect to listen to and follow.
So I wanted to ask, so one of the things I'm hearing when you're talking about like the pace for you is, how do you know for yourself and your family system that you desire a slower pace, and that's sort of healthier for you and your system?
I notice a direct correlation between when we are overworked and overbusy as a family, we have less connection time, we have less one-on-one time, and I notice behavioral problems with my kids. Like, I just notice an instant correlation between when we are connected and I spend like, time with my kids, and I'm like throwing her on the couch and she's giggling, and I'm like making eye contact and I'm doing push-ups with her. Like, I know that that connection it automatically creates a stability and a security and even a confidence within the kids to be able to do that. And we actually took a break for 2 months over the summer. We went to Europe to go explore a different way of living. And we wanted this to experience what it was like to live in a different country and to live away from a lifestyle that was not American. And we noticed, it was definitely difficult. We were with our kids like 24/7 for 2 months, nonstop. So we like ate with them, we slept with them, we did everything. So it was very, very hard. But there was a huge, astronomical increase in mindfulness and connection. And I remember we were living by a port in Sardinia. We were there for about a month. And we would go down to the docks at night, and my daughter and I just watched a bird eat bread for 15 minutes. We were just,
presence and just being these
mindful
unexpected moments of connection to nature and to life and
awe. We saw so many natural parks, and all of these different things that I think even with the intuition, it's interesting. It's always looking for like that bigger picture. Like what is that bigger picture? And in the midst of all of these things that are either distractions or the nitty gritty, how can you find like a place like where you feel settled? And at the end of the day, I feel like kids, parents, people, we all just want to be loved and recognized for who we are. Like that is the nuts and bolts of all of it.
Yeah, it's true. And I find that I do a daily gratitude list. And I'm a pretty simple human.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're much more simple.
We are.
I'm grateful for just these like small, beautiful moments.
Yes.
And like my morning tea,
Yes.
or my dog cuddling with me, or a bird chirping, or like these just ways of like the people in my life, right? Or,
Absolutely.
like I think that things have gotten very overcomplicated, and when I speak with my clients, it's almost always like their desire for more of what you just spoke about. More connection, more presence.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is a good practice for those listening, is just an easy way, is just to look back at what are the moments you felt that fulfillment.
Absolutely.
What you just described is this perfect example, like that. Watching the bird, you know, like for 15 minutes.
I mean, I have to say, like, I am probably from my personality, you can tell, like, I'm very like rush, like no nonsense. Like I value efficiency and I love it. And so, and my husband is very much like, we were here earlier, and it's like, there's a tree strawberry, which is an obscure fruit that I've never even heard of. And my kids are like, where? Or like, you know, when we were in France, they were just like, the best part of their adventures in France was we stayed at this hotel, and it was so small. And it was like, you could like the flooring was like ripping apart. Like we were on a budget. It was like the door was opening in night. Like the wind was roaring. We couldn't hear anything, but there were all these mulberry trees around the property, and they just went wild picking mulberries and just eating it. And he is much more into this like slowness and mindfulness. And so I've learned a lot about how to I would have never been like, let's go watch a bird eat for 15 minutes. But it really does help you slow down and connect you to, like we said, the greater things of nature and the world around us. And so to me, that was invaluable. So when I notice we're busy, and I like being busy, I like, you know, I want to lead a full life. And so I try to, you know, we have social calendars and things, but when it interferes and I notice that there are issues, that's when I think my husband and I both try to take a mental note and say, okay, we need to stop and slow down, and we need to do we have to say yes to everything?
Say no to a few things. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I feel, and also modern society has become so difficult because the norms that have been set for like birthday parties or for bachelorette parties or big milestone birthdays, there's a lot of planning that goes into all of those things, which is time away from the things that you might want to do, which is really, if you think back of those small moments in your day, those are the things that bring you fulfillment and joy.
And I'm leading actually a women's founder and startup leader group coaching right now in LA actually. And one of my big themes or observations is exactly that, is it's actually the moments that they all find most fulfilling are when they slow down and either take those extra 5 minutes to have a conversation with someone or just have a bit of space.
Yeah. For you, like, how do you notice, like, what is something that you think people can practice to remind them of that mindfulness and remind them of that introspection? Like, it's great to have it, but what does that practice mean, or how do we do it?
Yeah, so I do think that a few practices I'll share. One is, a client just said this the other day. Where am I? He asks himself, where am I?
Oh, wow.
Am I thinking about what's happening? Am I just trying to rush through my to-do list? Asking yourself, where am I right now? Even if you're listening to this, you can say, where am I? Am I actually listening to this podcast? Am I half listening, half doing something else, which is totally okay too.
Right.
But are you noticing that?
Right. Are you aware of it?
Are you aware of it?
Yeah.
I also find that part of the gift of having a coach is like you have that reminder and
Absolutely.
reflection back. So some form of accountability, or some people are very self-sufficiently accountable. So if they put something in, like their reminders or check-ins, whatever. But usually the practices it's sort of this like slow chipping away.
Right. It's not overnight realization.
But I think the biggest thing is having awareness, like being able to start noticing. And the other thing, back to what we were talking about, the critical voice is like, if you ask yourself, where am I? An easy question to then ask is like, how am I speaking to myself right now? Or how am I? And if there's disconnect or anxiety present, it's almost always like in a harsh way, or in a mean way, or, there's always sort of this story that's happening behind the scenes that we're not even aware of.
Yeah. That we're telling ourselves a negative story about ourselves because we're just so used to doing that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of my clients get really stuck in perspectives of like, I have to keep doing this job because I have to keep providing for my family, and there's no other option because X, Y, and Z. But often if we sort of slow down and check in, I do a lot of career transition too. It's like actually the underlying fear is something maybe different. My identity is really tied to my work, or my sense of stability and lack of trust in myself to go, it's sort of, there's always something else happening.
Right. That is not being illuminated.
Yeah.
How do you balance competing priorities? And it's funny, I was reading this book, and he said priority is singular. It's a singular construct. It's not priorities. That defeats the purpose of the priority of what is important to you and what you value. Yeah. And I thought that was really fascinating. I loved it because, well, how do you balance what is important and what matters to you and what doesn't in a world that is constantly throwing a lot of different things at you?
Well, I think I do some work around like purpose statements and helping clients get clear on what they feel like their purpose is. Yeah. And it's often not as clear of like, it usually has sort of it almost has a broadness that's applicable in different places. So it might be, I am a trusted human in the people's lives that I'm, whatever, in my life.
You start somewhere.
That might be,
right.
You start somewhere. But I think that when you think about how to live on, it's like the idea of living on purpose, right? Living on alignment with your purpose. When my clients get an access to it, they actually have a lot of clarity on priority.
Interesting.
It's just when they're in fear, or when they feel like a sense of rushing or urgency, they disconnect from that.
Right.
But when they're actually connected in,
interesting,
it feels really clear. I have to simplify my life and really focus on X, Y, and Z, or reduce my social media intake, or maybe sometimes it's like really getting clear on who my friends are, and not feeling like I'm just stretched across 20 people or whatever it is.
Right.
We can't be friends with
everybody. And knowing when to like limit ourselves and our time, and being intentional with where we want to show up and for what purpose.
So I'll ask you that then. Yeah. When you feel like, what are your priorities, or what is your priority when you feel like you're connected to your intuition or your sense of purpose?
I think that I would say like my overall purpose is like, it's like family, like leading, showing my children an example of what I want good humans to look like, teaching them empathy and kindness and compassion, and honestly being like, to a fault, like vigilant about it, where I will not give up because I think it's that important. And so I think spending my time doing that, like like one of the things that I found interesting is when we talked about intuition, it's easy for it to get buried, and it does get buried for people depending on the time and place that they're in, right? But I went to law school. I have like a law degree, and I was really excited to practice law. But then my first experience out of law school was in a firm with family law that I absolutely like hated. Like
what did you hate about it?
It was so stressful. And it was just dealing with, dissolution and angry people and conflict all the time. Yeah. And so that automatically is going to permeate into my own mind space. And my boss, the principal attorney of the firm, she was literally exactly a replica of the Devil Wears Prada boss. She even looked like her. Wow. It was awful. And I realized in that instant where I had gone to law school, I was just newly minted as an attorney. My husband and I spent time in India, and then we had come back. And so I was really excited to practice law. But then being in that environment made me realize that I want balance in my future family life. I knew I wanted to be a mother. I knew I wanted to have kids, and I wanted to have a very intentional relationship with my husband. Yeah. And so I just realized that was not the path for me. And so I switched into my husband convinced me to go into sales and to go into the tech world. And so I switched career paths, even though I felt really guilty, but intuitively I was able to access that part of me and say, I know that family and doing something broader for the world, or just sharing my experience on what it means to be content and philosophy is something that I want to share with my kids that I hope that they will share with the rest of the world.
Well, also what you just described, I'll often go through specific career experiences my clients have had, going back to what was your job in high school?
Yeah.
What did you love about it? And one of the things that you just said that is so, I'm not surprised that you didn't like that environment 1 minute before, which is you believe in the importance of empathy and of connection and of living intentionally. Right. Which, I've worked with people in those environments you're describing, and some people love it.
Yeah.
Right? It's for some, it's
an adrenaline rush.
Yeah,
they like being in the fast paced of getting things done in deadlines. And for me,
aren't impacted as deeply by this sort of emotional piece of it. I also was going to say, and I'm sure there's plenty of these types of practices online, but I do a future visioning practice where you meet your future self.
Oh, I love that.
And,
I love that.
it's almost always this compassionate, this future self is almost always compassionate, grounded, present, non-judgmental.
Right.
Supportive, encouraging, every time I do this. And it's really almost rarely they have this 6 cars in the garage or they have, no, it's really about this presence and this quality of being.
Right.
Contentment.
And almost like a peace of mind.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And the words of encouragement that almost always my clients say from their future self is they just said you're doing great. Just just be nice to yourself. Yeah. Trust yourself more. It's just this sort of energy of, and I'm getting tingling. Yeah. I'm noticing that connection and resonance because it's true. It's and that's our wise self, or that's our highest self, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
That's our sort of connection to this greater sense of awareness.
Yeah. And being able to direct the present self into a pathway that leads to that future self.
Yeah.
And it's because it's true. It's at the end of the day, right? We have one life to live. Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen. Something can happen at any time. And so how do you want to live? How do you want to be remembered around you? I forgot who it was. Someone, I think it was actually my brother, who had asked me something a while ago. And he's like, if your daughters could describe you, I think at that point they were only 1, but if they could describe you in 3rd grade and they had to write an essay about their mom, about their dad, what would they say about you? And that is also just, I love that future visioning because it reinforces in a very positive and encouraging way and in a very non-judgmental way of how you want to show up and that you empower yourself to show up that way.
Well, and it's almost the way I do it too is you sort of you meet your future self. It's easy for us to externalize or imagine the best qualities of ourself almost in the future.
Yes.
But then I have it sort of it comes back in and you already are those qualities.
Right.
It's sort of
inverse projection.
Yeah, and it's how do you access more of that today,
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
So if you're listening, you can ask, what would my future self say? What guidance, what action can I take maybe to feel more alive, more connected, more joyful?
Yes.
Right? Can I put one of my clients calls it a U-turn. He was on a motorcycle once and like he decided was like, I have to get to this place by this time. And he is like, no, I got to take a U-turn. He went back to the beach.
Yeah.
So like those kind of moments, where we're like, no,
we're not in a rush.
Yeah. Waking up to that, like, oh no, I should go take that just for fun.
Yeah.
Just because,
Exactly.
Yeah.
We were in a, I was watching my daughter and I, we'd come back from Europe and had this whole experience. And, you get back into the environment and then you go kind of like you go jump back into normalcy. Right. And so we were doing that and we were in the car and she was playing a song and we must have been on our way to an activity or coming back from something. And she was just playing the song. And I was like, okay, come on, let's go. Put your seatbelt on, like get in the car. And she's like, but we're not in a rush. Like, why do we have to rush? And I was like, yes. We don't have to rush.
They're such good teachers. I know.
They really are because they see things so purely and so innocently that, I asked her the other day, I was like, what's life about? And she was like, I was like, what do you think this is about? Like, Jo, what is life about? She's 8.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she was like, family, spending time with people you care about and having fun.
Oh my gosh.
And she said learning. And she was like, in learning. And I was like,
I agree.
Yeah. And I was like, you have so much more to teach me. Tell me.
That's so beautiful.
So it was great.
Wow, I love it.
I could talk to you for hours. So I really appreciate you being here. How can people learn more about you and your practice and your coaching? Yeah.
My website is my first and last name. So Anna Laifer.
Okay. Anna Laifer.
Yeah. Laifer. So ANNALAIFER.com. And then they can email me at anna@annalaifer.com. I would love to hear any thoughts. And also, I have a big network of coaches and support, so I'm always happy to help connect. If I'm not the right person, I'm always happy to connect people. And yeah, I work with the beautiful thing about the work I do is I work with a huge range of people.
Okay.
I don't think of it as like I only work with like this. It's really about sort of the individual connection.
Absolutely.
And sort of this, a lot of what we spoke about, desire for more connection to purpose, really about like bigger picture, meaning, purpose, intuition, trust. Yeah.
Self-compassion.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody, AnnaLaifer.com. And thank you. Yeah, you too.